Hello, my lovely rose garden! I've made videos about my books and characters before, but I realized that, shockingly, I've never made videos just explaining what the books are about. The closest I've come to doing that are the book trailers, which are usually short scenes or snippets of out-of-context dialogue, so I've decided to change that. Now let me tell you all about ALiCE. ALiCE is my first book. It was published in 2016 and will have a 5-year anniversary edition released this year. ALiCE is a horror book and a kind of love letter to slasher horror tropes from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, combined with references to more modern horror pieces that I was very into at the time I was writing it in the late aughts and early 2010s. This is a book that I started writing in high school and redrafted throughout college after 2 a.m. brainstorm sessions with Ray at Denny's, and Ray is still the #1 fan of this book in the whole world, and I love him for that. It's easy to look back on your older work and only see the mistakes and the things you would do differently now, so having someone that is unabashedly and 100% in your corner when it comes to that older work really helps. And I do still love ALiCE. It has just about everything I love about the horror genre in it because I wrote it to be a purely self-indulgent romp through the kind of horror I was into at the time. ALiCE began as a piece of short fiction that I posted to DeviantArt where I was just trying to write something scary for Halloween one year just to see if I could actually do it. I think I posted a total of 3 chapters which leaned much more heavily on the Alice in Wonderland influence of the story and featured the main character Christopher as a soldier returning from World War II and processing his trauma through a series of abstract and strange dreams. It was very American McGee's Alice / Alice Madness Returns meets Jacob's Ladder, 2 media properties I was very obsessed with at the time. Ray got involved early as he really liked the chapters I posted, and this became one of the first things we bonded over as our friendship was still in its infancy. He encouraged me to keep going, and when I didn't have any more to write after these first 3 chapters that wasn't straight Vocaloid Alice of Human Sacrifice fanfiction, I started re-outlining and recontextualizing the characters in a more standard slasher horror setting with the same dreamlike motif of the Alice in Wonderland inspiration. And then, many redrafts and edits later, ALiCE as we know it today came to be. So what does that final story look like? To quote the blurb, Christopher Robinson didn't deserve what happened to him. Then again, almost no one does. Christopher was a simple man with a simple goal, to make sure his charges at Woodrow Children's Asylum were as healthy and happy as possible. Not an easy task, and running out of medicine on the stormiest night of the year didn't make it any easier. The car accident made it impossible. Now stranded on a nearly deserted island with no clue as to how or why he and one of his patients were brought there, Christopher's goal has changed: get the child and himself out of Wonderland. Faced with the cruel inhabitants of the island and his own dwindling sanity, Christopher must find a way to escape before he becomes a victim of one of the island's many lunatics, or joins them. Admittedly, not my best blurb, and most likely this will get a facelift with the 5th anniversary edition as well, but it gets the basic plot across. Christopher is a children's asylum orderly, and he does his best. He really does. But pit the best of a very tired and traumatized man against an entire island full of people with malicious intent with no way off, and, well, you get ALiCE. Like I said, there are a lot of slasher tropes here, as well as shoutouts to prominent horror works. Even just in the description, you can probably already catch a few nods to some of my favorites. And honestly, that's a big part of what I love about ALiCE. Finding ways to sneak in references to both horror works and Alice in Wonderland, some of which are more obvious than others, made writing this book an enjoyable experience even when I was pushing myself to stay up until 3 a.m. to write it so I could be just as tired as Christopher and capture that authentic exhaustion and frustration. Looking back, not a great technique, don't recommend it. One of the things I say a lot about ALiCE is that there are 2 ways to read it. You can stick to the surface level and enjoy the gimmick of an Alice in Wonderland-inspired horror story that all but outright challenges you to catch as many references to other horror works as you can, and have fun with the sometimes campy slasher story. Or you can go just a bit deeper and think a little harder about some of the threads that are left loose to uncover the psychological horror lurking just under the surface. Christopher's major character flaw is adamant denial. He will delude himself and straight up argue with the narration so that he doesn't have to see what's in front of him. If you, as the reader, follow some of those abandoned trains of thought to their logical conclusions, you can discover some deeper lore, like Christopher's backstory, which is the only one that isn't directly stated in the text. Despite definitely being a horror book, I consider ALiCE to be one of the funnest of my books to read because if you're into horror, there's just a lot here to enjoy. Thanks to the Alice in Wonderland style structure, Christopher pinballs around to different horror set pieces and has various near-episodic experiences that are sure to get you at least once. This book was designed to include a multitude of common phobias and, in line with the fourth wall breaking media I was obsessed with at the time, mess with the reader just as much as Christopher. For that reason, while the book is technically rated PG-13 since it doesn't contain anything too graphic for teens, there is a lot of potentially triggering content in this book, so I don't usually recommend it to readers under the age of 16. Pay close attention to the content warnings on my bookstore for it, and if you think you can handle it, then by all means. Just don't say you weren't warned, since so far almost every reader who's messaged me personally has had difficulty getting through at least one chapter, and that chapter is different for every reader. This is where the semi-episodic nature of the story can actually be useful. If there's a scene or chapter that's just a little too much for you, it is possible to skip it without the rest of the book becoming incomprehensible as a result, and you can use later context clues to fill in the gaps of what happened in that scene or chapter. There are actually scenes that still creep me out to this day that I tend to skim over when I look back into ALiCE because I need a reference or want to recall a particular line in exact wording. As I said earlier, this book is everything I love in horror, and that means it's also everything that really gets under my skin in horror. So it's not just the reader and Christopher who are getting terrorized, but the writer as well. Now let's talk about some of the characters. Christopher Robinson is the lead, and he is a good boy who is doing his best. Christopher was designed to be what I would consider the ultimate horror protagonist. Well-meaning, determined, kind to a fault, and lacking any and all genre awareness. If there is a stupid decision you can make in a horror movie, you'd best believe Christopher is going to make it. As earlier stated, his major flaw is that he represses and denies anything that makes him uncomfortable, which in a horror setting is going to be a lot of things, and it's definitely this willful ignorance that ties into a lot of his dumber decisions. Head empty, only loving his baby boy. Speaking of Christopher's baby boy, Mickey takes the creepy child role to a degree that's almost hilarious when Christopher looks at him and is like, "Baby boy, baby," and just about everyone else points at him and says, "Evil." But to be fair, Mickey has never been anything other than sweet and loving and maybe a little concerningly overpossessive toward Christopher. He's just a smart kid who's mature for his age and sees things a little too clearly, right? Whatever, Christopher loves him, that is his son, and he will go to hell and back for him as many times as it takes for them to escape Wonderland together. Moving on to the Islanders themselves, Morgan is overly charming to the point of being kind of a douchebag, and I can't help but love him for that. He's definitely got this I peaked in high school vibe, and being the sheriff doesn't really mean a whole lot when the town consists of less than a dozen people, but it does mean that he's the only person in town with a gun, for better or worse. Probably worse. His twin, because of course we've got a set of twins here, runs the local deli and is both the most talkative and least sociable person in Wonderland. Like, yeah, he gives Christopher information, but it's never particularly useful. He gets on best with his cat Cheshire, and the less said about Cheshire, the better. Oh wait, did I say Matthew was the least sociable person in town? I was wrong. That title goes to Michael, local drifter who either sleeps in an abandoned house he broke into, or a jail cell whenever Morgan catches him. He doesn't seem to take anything particularly serious and is just kind of there, all the time, with a creepy smile and a cryptic line of dialogue that he'll just as quickly brush off as a joke when questioned about it. To the surprise of absolutely no one, this asshole is Ray's favorite character out of all my work. And finally, we have Prima and Terciera, the only two halfway functioning people on this island through the power of lesbian romance. Prima runs the local bar and slays the island's many monsters as a hobby, while Terciera is the more stay-at-home type. That home just happens to be a broken-down amusement park. They're very functional, nothing suspicious here. And that's everyone. Mary and Joseph who? Abel? Never heard of him. Did I just say something about monsters? No, forget that, moving right along. The ideas that I had in mind to explore while writing ALiCE were, how far will someone go in the name of parental love for a child? How much can you push someone before they break? What are the narrator and reader's roles in a story? Is reading or otherwise perceiving the story a participatory action? And if not, can it be made to resemble one? Of course, you may come away from reading ALiCE with different guiding questions in mind that lead you to completely different themes. Reading is interpretive, and whatever messages you get out of it are just as valid as the ones I intended to be there. I'm always eager to hear what different readers take away from the books they read and what your thoughts on my books are. If you're interested in ALiCE and would like to know more, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to answer any questions you have for me. While you're there, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more like it, and check out the links in the description to my bookstore, where you can buy this book, the Roselin Books Patreon, my social media accounts for more content, and the book trailers for ALiCE that have already been posted to this channel so you can get a better feel for what kind of book it is. Keep reading till next time, Rose Garden.